Well, good morning, Bethel Baptist Church. Today, man, I want to bring that third treasure in our 2-minute treasure series, looking at the different aspects of God's love. And we've been looking at those in the parables of lost things. Again, I want to give credit to a friend of mine in this named Gary Permenter. And Gary is going to be at our church this fall. He's going to be actually leading our revival this fall. So we love Brother Gary. But as we looked at that very first parable, the parable of the lost sheep, we saw that God's love is an every person love. There's no one that God does not love. And man, we need to hear that today, that God's love is an every person love. Also, then the second parable, we saw that God's love is at any cost love. It's an at any cost love. And we saw that in the parable of the lost coin. And so this morning, we're going to look at the parable of the lost son. Sometimes it's called the parable of the prodigal son. And we all know that parable so well, that there was this Lord that had two sons, and the younger son, he's pretty much saying, man, I wish you were dead. Just give me my half of inheritance, my part of the inheritance. And so the father, he did that. He gave it to him, and says a few days passed, and that son's out of here. Man, he goes off into this foreign land, and the Bible says that he spent all that he had on reckless living, just living a life of debauchery. Then the Bible says that, man, eventually a famine came into the land, and he began to be in want, and eventually he was feeding the swine. And we see that the father's on the lookout. Eventually that young son comes to his senses. He says, even the servants in my father's house got it better than this. I know what I'll do. He says, I'll try to go back. He says, man, I'll put it to my dad this way. I know that I've sinned against God and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, but if you would just make me a servant. And so he began that trek back to his father's house. And it says that while he was still a long way off, that the father saw him. See, that father had been looking for him every day. That father looked down that road, and he looked for that son that was lost. And it says he saw him, and he felt compassion. He ran and embraced him and kissed him. The son begins to give this spiel. Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to the servants, check this out. Bring quickly the very best robe. Put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. Bring that fatted calf and kill it. And let's eat and celebrate. For my son that was dead, he's alive. And he was lost, but now he's found. And they began to celebrate. So I want you to know this truth in this parable, this aspect of God's love. God's love is an all-the-time love. I want you to think about it. That's that father, man, when that son said, hey, look, I wish you were dead, he still loved him. When he took his inheritance, that father still loved him. He went off in the foreign land. He did terrible things and wasted it on riotous living. That father never stopped loving that son. He never stopped. He was always looking for him to come back. And when he came back, that father still loved him. Man, when he gave that spiel, the father still loved him. Hey, you got to know this today. God's love is an all-the-time love, because we've all been there. We've been in that place where we're like, hey, man, God can't still love me. Look at what I've become, at what I've done. But God says, no, my love's different. Man, it's always different from us. My love's different. My love's all-the-time love. I'm always here with my arms open wide, and I'm ready to receive you. You know, there's a group called Jesus Culture. Back in 2011, they put out a song called One Thing Remains. And the song goes like this: your love never fails. It never